Shalom and welcome to our fifth life lesson. We began from the beginning of Genesis with the Parsha of Breshit, the beginning, and then we had Noach. Lech Lecha talked about Abraham, and the same thing, Vayera. The fourth one was after Abraham's circumcision and the binding of Isaac. And now we're holding in the fifth one, Chayei, and that is chapter 23. But before that, I would like to mention an interesting story that they tell us. Some of you may have heard there was a town known as Chelm. Chelm, this is in the Jewish world when we want to joke around about people that they were actually very smart. So always when we want to say somebody that's not so smart, they would say, that's a Chelm story. So it's known by a lot of people when you want to say you don't believe the story or the story doesn't make sense, you say, this is a Chelm story. So here's one of these Chelm stories. So these wise men of Chelm were having a philosophy discussion. And one of them says, considering how hard life is, I think sometimes it's been better not to have been born at all. True, says the other one, but realistically, how many people are that lucky? Maybe 1 in 10,000. So we are lucky that we were all born and we're here. And the first verse in this Parsha, in this segment, says as follows. And this was the life of Sarah. 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. Shnei Chayei Sarah, the years of Sarah's life. So the verse told us how long Sarah has lived. This is Abraham's wife. 127. But then the verse goes and says, these were the years of Sarah. We know that everything in the Torah is very exact in the Bibles. And it doesn't repeat itself unless there's an important message to learn. So if the Torah is telling us that Sarah lived for 127 years, so we know already that this is how many years she lived. So why does the Torah have to conclude again that this was the years of Sarah's life? And obviously there's a very important message to learn from it. So one of the commentators that we have mentioned many times, the Rabbi, says as follows. Why does it repeat again? To teach us, Kulan shavin letova. They were all equal for good. In other words, all the days of the life of Sarah, they were all good. They were all positive. There was nothing negative in her life. Now, when we hear that kind of a statement, and as much of great scholars we think we are, but when we look into what we've learned so far, it's hard to say such a thing that every day of her life was positive. To begin with, we go back. She starred in the country where she was born. Our sages tell us that her father was killed by Nimrod. Nimrod was the ruler then of the country because Abraham has decided to serve the one God, rebelled against what Nimrod would say. And if you remember, Abraham was put in the fiery oven. It says also that Haran, that was his brother, was also put in the fiery oven. Abraham was saved, but not Haran. Haran's daughter was Sarah and Lot, where we know Abraham ended up marrying his niece, Sarah. So we know that life wasn't such an easy life. At the age of 65, Sarah is told to move. Where exactly she's going to go, no address. So really she has to go to believe in God. And God tells Abram, you need to leave your country. Where am I going? I'll tell you where you're going. If we look back, this is pure fate. And here you have a devoted wife, follows her husband, and together they move. And even our days, that moving is not such an easy thing. Going back in the olden days, to move from one country into another country wasn't so simple. And here they are, they're moving. They finally arrive in the land of Israel. Then it was called Canaan. They hardly had any time to settle. There's a hunger. And here she has to keep on moving. So they decide to go to Egypt. They arrived in Egypt. She's taken away by Pharaoh and his ministers because she was so beautiful. So they took her away. What we would call in our days, she was kidnapped. A miracle has happened. Pharaoh couldn't have touched her, and he had to let her go. But to go and say that every day was positive of Sarah's life, if we look on her life, it doesn't look that way. I'm sure there was quite a few happy moments, but there was also some what we call some of those down moments. And then let's take into the fact that for 90 years, she doesn't have a child, and she wants so much to have a child, and she's barren. That's not nothing. And it's not only that one time she was kidnapped by Pharaoh. Later on we have in the story also she was kidnapped by Avimelech, by another king. So if we look back, it's not an easy life. And now, not only that, when she finally has a child, and she's waiting for him so much to get married, he's already in his 20s, early 30s, and this boy's not getting married. And finally, when she's hoping 35, 36, maybe then he's going to get married, all of a sudden Abraham informs her that he has to take the son on a trip where actually he's going to sacrifice him because God said so. So you can only imagine the tumult and what's going through in Sarah's mind. And our sages actually tell us that when she passed away, she didn't even know if Isaac had survived or not. Abraham took Yitzchok for a trip, and we know what happened when he's about to slaughter him. The angel comes and says, don't do it. But as you know, in those times, you couldn't Skype back home, you couldn't text, you couldn't email. And our sages tell us that when they returned home, Sarah had already passed away. So there's a good possibility that she passed away. She doesn't even know if he made it through or not, if he survived. But the great hope that she had when her son is born, she doesn't even get to see him to be married. This is what we see in this section of Parshat Chayei, when after she passed away. The other thing is here that Abraham has to go and find a place where to bury her. And he has a whole negotiations about it. So then the question becomes, so what exactly does it mean that the verse repeated the words that Sarah's life was equally good because everything, every day of her life was positive? So our rabbis explain a very important point, that even if from the outside doesn't look that every day was positive, but she was a very positive woman. Her attitude about life was very positive. So in other words, when things didn't go good, she didn't look down on it because of her connection and the level of her connection to God. So therefore she realized, I am living my life because this is what God wants from me. So therefore, up or down, everything is positive. So he demands from us quite of a high level to learn from her, but this is the kind of role model that we have from her. I want to bring out another very interesting point in connection with that as we all know, we just commemorated 50 years to the assassination of President Kennedy. And in November, and we all know when we look into the life of President Kennedy, what stands out is his famous statement, ask not what you could do for the country, what the country could do for yourself, for us. Anyways, one of the important things at that time that happened is he also came up with the idea of the Peace Corps, that people should go out and volunteer for the country, for the United States. And at that time, one of the things that he said is, wherever you're going to go and you're going to service this country, the United States, the idea is not the salary that you're going to get, because it's very possible you're not going to get such a great salary as you would have a job here in the United States. Especially you're going to have to live with the people that you're going to go to, eat what they eat. But the idea is to volunteer and to do good with the message what this country is all about. So interesting enough, at the same time, there was the Lubavitcher Rebbe that is the head of the Chabad movement, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of blessed memory. And at the same time, this was Purim in 1963, right after the President Kennedy spoke about the Peace Corps. He also spoke very much about what he's been speaking for at least a decade, since the 50s, about sending messengers known in the Chabad world as shluchim, rabbis, to go out and to spread the message of Judaism. As we know, and a little bit background here, after the Holocaust, Jewish world had suffered by losing so many. And we could say that many people were very down because, to lose 6 million people of your own, it's quite a lot. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe encouraged, and in the 1950s, when he assumed his leadership, he began the idea of to bring everyone back to Judaism. And his idea was that wherever there's Jewish people living in the world, somebody should be there, a rabbi should be there to help them out. Similar to the idea of the Peace Corps, but we called it shlichut, that's going on a message, going to be messengers. And from all over, he sent people to Morocco, Tunisia, France, South Africa, Australia, including Israel, here in the United States. And as we find ourselves today in end of 2013, there's close to 4,000 Chabad branches, Lubavitch Chabad, that's the name of the movement, all over the world. One of these locations happens to be Burlington, Vermont. So the Rebbe's message has been to go out. And he said, so when Kennedy was speaking about this, he says the same idea, and even more so, is the idea to go out and help others. And he used almost the same language. And I'm quoting what the Rebbe said. He says, I can't guarantee what your salary will be, and I can't guarantee what you will eat and drink. Here comes the aspect, because to get kosher in a lot of these places is not so easy. But the Rebbe continued, but rest assured that wherever you go, you are going to be God's emissary. And that's a very important point. Now, how do you come and you accomplish such a very important mission, and how is that in connection with Chayei Sarah, with the life of Sarah, what we're talking about? Because we're looking on the patriarchs and the matriarchs as role models. We want to learn from them how to be able to serve God on a day-by-day basis. So I want to bring out a very important point that will help us to understand this whole thing. In Hasidus, they bring out this point, where we'll try to bring it out in what we say in a secular language. They say that there's two kinds of people. There's what we call a thermometer and a thermostat. What is the difference? A thermometer tells you what the weather is. What's the weather? What's the situation? How many degrees in this room? This is what the thermometer tells you. The thermostat means that you set what do you want, what the temperature should be. A thermometer, you're not controlling the situation. You are controlled by the thermometer. So you want to know, what should I do? So you say, let me hear what people are saying. And you take a poll and you ask what people have to say. And based on that, majority of the people want now we should be dancing without shoes. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. A thermostat means you set the tone. And the way you set the tone, that's the way it's going to be. So I decided that in my house, for example, at night, I'm going to set that it should be in the 60s. So that's how it's going to be. And if I'm really, really cold, the way I'm going to set it in the 70s, so that's how it's going to be. Translate that in two aspects, in our attitude on life and day by day, and also in our relationship when it comes to our Judaism. So when we look at our attitude on life many times we look on things, what other people think, and according to that, that's how we base our attitude, our life. So when you hear a statement, someone says, life is good. What do they mean when they say life is good? Really what they're saying, I like the way I'm being treated. What's the problem? I got everything that I need from whatever kind of a support or whatever kind of situation but life is good. But then there is a deeper point. When I say life is good, it's not just that I'm being treated well. It is because I had set the tone. Life, why am I happy? Because I had created the situation, and according to that, that's why I am happy. I'm happy because I'm happy to serve, and that's the way things are. This is a very important point. When I base myself on what other people have to say, and I feel very happy about this, but I depend on what other people have to say. I'm not an independent person. I'm just basically doing what others, according to what other people feel. But when I base things, it's because that's the right thing to do, and I'm happy that way. So when I wake up in the morning, and in Judaism we know, when we open our eyes, there's a special saying, Modeh ani lefanecha. Thank you, we thank the Almighty that we are alive. And therefore, when I thank the Almighty that I opened my eyes and I'm alive, so no matter what's going to happen throughout the day, I am happy because I know I am here to serve God. There's a famous verse in the Psalms. It's in Psalm 16. It says, Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. I always put God in front of me. God is always in front of me. The Baal Shem Tov, one of the leaders of the Hasidic movement, the founder of the Hasidic movement, came and explained that the word shiviti also means in Hebrew shaveh, equal. So he says, what does it mean? Not only that I put God in front of me, but God is equally all the time in front of me. No matter what my situation is, if I am happy or not happy, if I'm eating well or not eating well, if I made money, I didn't make money, God is always there. We have sometimes a kind of an attitude that when things are good, so we thank God, or sometimes we forget about thanking God when things are well. And the other times is the other way around, is when sometimes we remind ourselves about God when things don't go good. Somebody is very sick, all of a sudden, oh, I need to pray to God. Where were you till now? You woke up all of a sudden when you're needed, or you have to ask God something. When we say Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, I put God in front of me equally all the time, this is how the Baal Shem Tov explains. No matter what happens, whether people praise or people shame you, it is always equal to you. God is always equal to you. Whether you eat well or you don't, whether you're happy or you're sad, what motivates us all the time is that I could serve God. And from that point of view, it doesn't make a difference, all those details that come and challenge us. Because I know that this is another bump in the road to serve God. So this, going back to the point that we were saying about Sarah, this is the important point to learn from it. Because in Sarah's life, and of course, there were days that things didn't go well. And there were so many days that she was praying to have a child and she doesn't have. But to her, she knew one thing. I'm here to serve God. And because I'm here to serve God, so it doesn't make a difference. So therefore Rashi says, all her days equally were good because she was a positive person to begin with. So in other words, it's the way we look on things. It doesn't make a difference. And I'll use another simple example. A lot of times, you see a person is very sad, and he asks them, what happened? Someone insulted me. So in other words, you thought all this time that you're very wonderful, that you're doing everything right, but because someone insulted you, all of a sudden everything looked so bad. So that means you're dependent on what the other person had to say. So till that person said something, you thought you're a very wonderful person. All of a sudden, someone made a comment to you, and you think that you're a piece of nothing. So basically, you're depending on what someone else had to say. But if you to start your day, you look at yourself, you know what my goal in life is, and I know what I believe, and I know what I should be doing, so then it really doesn't make a difference. Even if I make mistakes, I'm going to try to correct them because I know there's a higher authority here. I believe in God, and I'm going to try to do what God wants from me. So it really doesn't make a difference. You know, another thing is a lot of times we're human beings. So if you see the person is smiling to you, then you feel good about yourself. But if you see the person is not smiling to you, so you say right away, I must be doing something wrong. Why is the person not smiling to me? Well, we all want all the time that people should be smiling to us, no question about it. Or the same thing, I made money, I feel good. I lost money, I am down. So all the time, all these things, looks like we depend on other things and we forget about the important thing, that this is the Almighty and our relationship with Him. And this is what it means in a deeper sense. Kulan shavin letovah, they were all equally good. So that brings out this very important point of the beginning of the section here. Now we find something very interesting. God promised Abraham two important things. When He told him, and that we had it a few segments ago, when He told him, leave your country, He basically promised him two important things: the land and children. Here it was Abraham and Sarah. It looked like they didn't have anything for themselves. And plus, they didn't have children. Comes God and says, go to this place that I'm going to show you. And we know this ended up to be the land of Canaan, Israel. I will make you into a great nation, and I'll promise you that this land will be yours. So He's promising him the land, and He's promising him to have children. And here we come in the beginning of our portion here, and becomes very important here. Seems like these two promises of God are going nowhere. Sarah had passed away, and as she passed away, he's looking even to find a place. Here God promised him the land is yours, and yes, they're going into a negotiation about finding a place to bury his wife. So the promise of the land somehow hasn't yet been fulfilled. A son, the son is not married. You can't even think about grandchildren if there's no wife. But this is the section that we deal with these two things. Number one, Abraham purchased a piece of land. And regardless that he had to purchase a piece of land, the bottom line is he owns now a piece of land in the Holy Land. By the way, this piece of land that he bought, and this becomes very important, we're still arguing about it. So even though you read in the Bible, it's written very clear, he paid money, 400 silver coins. This wasn't a bargain. He really paid for it, lots of money. But these two things happens in our Parsha. Number one, he acquires the land. And number two, Yitzchok, his son Isaac, gets married. And this is something very important. So in other words, we see the continuation here, despite all the challenges. And that answers another important point that we call this the life of Sarah. Why you call this segment life of Sarah? But she passed away. Why you call this the life of Sarah? Because the life of Sarah is when we see that what she believed in continues. And this is what continues here. He's starring the land, the son gets married, and towards the end of the portion, when these things are happening, Isaac got married to Rivka, and there's a continuation. That's when we come to the passing away of Abraham. Abraham passes away in a good old age because he sees all his challenges finally coming into reality, that he had succeeded. All his challenges, he was able to overcome them and see that in actuality, a good life that he had, and seeing Yitzchok and even Ishmael they're the ones that buried him, and Abraham lived a good life. And this is the lesson that we learn from this Parsha, especially that Sarah becomes from us a good role model, that everything that we have in life, we should always look on it with a positive attitude. And then when we are in a positive attitude, then everything else falls into place. Thank you.